Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here!
So if there's one thing that I'm actually bad at, and there are several, but if there's one thing that I wanted to call out that I would say I'm just terrible at it, it's gardening. I cannot garden to save my life. It doesn't really matter what I do. It always turns out that gardening doesn't work for me. You could make the joke that, I could dump green paint over my entire body and my thumbs would still not have green paint on them. It's just who I am. I know all the techniques. I know what it takes. I know the nutrient levels, the soil, nurturing, the water, everything else that goes along with it. But I cannot garden. And it's a weird thing because my grandmother, she was tremendous at gardening. She was always really, really good at gardening. She could take literally anything, stick it in the ground and have success. I remembered she'd grow roses throughout the year. Didn't matter where she planted them around the house, she would be able to grow them and they would have success and they were really nice. She had an orchid garden. She had all kinds of things, all kinds of fruit trees and everything in her yard. Everything grew. And I was just, sometimes it's the soil in your yard. I know that's part of it. But this is my lime tree. When I planted my lime tree, it was in a pot. It was probably, about a third as tall as it is now. And it had 3 or 4 limes on it. It was very green and lush and everything was great. And when I put it in the ground and took it out of the pot, I put soil around it, I put fertilizer around it, I watered it, and the tree actually shrunk from where it was to a smaller size and did not produce fruit for another 3 years. Now it's got, I think 1 lime on it right here. That's the 1 lime I see, and it's probably the 3rd or 4th lime I've gotten off the tree, so I would say I haven't had much success with it. My mango tree over here, mangoes in Florida grow pretty much anywhere. I had 3 mango trees in my yard. 2 of them I managed to kill off. I don't know if you're familiar with mangoes at all, but mangoes, they're impossible to kill, but somehow I managed to do it. And I've talked to a couple of people who are much more horticulturally apt or able maybe, and they look at me and they go, how did you kill a mango tree? And so my 1 mango tree that's doing pretty well, it's actually green, I actually have it growing, and it's doing okay. Every year it blooms, it never produces mangoes. That's just who I am. That's just the way things are. I kind of accept that. I've tried many different things in terms of gardening. I've tried working with composting with my composter. And I compost with it because we eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and I take all my compost and put it in there. I roll it all the time, and I put it on my plants, and my plants stay nice and green, but they don't produce fruit. For a period of time, I decided I was going to create a garden box, and I put a garden box in my backyard. I ran the sprinkler system so it would water it regularly. I put some nice soil in it. I had a couple of plants that are supposed to help encourage the soil. I had some worms that I put in it to help, aerate it and make sure that there was nice nutrients coming into it. And I was able to plant several different plants, and a couple of them started to grow more or less. But then, something happened, whatever, the soil changed, something else happened and they died off. Maybe it was too hot because I had it at the back of my house, I'm not sure. But in any event, they all died off. And the one thing I was able to grow was basil. Basil just kept growing, and I don't know why it kept growing, but it kept growing. And I had basil coming out of my ears for a period of time. And then I did take the top off of 1 pineapple and plant it, and it was growing really well, and it was actually developing a pineapple. It was probably about the size of my fist when it was there, and a squirrel came and took it off of there. So that was the one thing that I almost had that I didn't wind up having, because that's just the way it works. So I've tried many different things, and I have no success. I've just had no luck, nothing's gone my way when it comes to gardening. So I've been taking some time over the last few weeks and thinking about what could I do to change my gardening habits? What could I do differently? Could I just strip it all away and start over and think about gardening differently? Maybe just start with a whole new approach to it. And as I started to read more, I realized, you know what? I'm doing everything that you're supposed to do, but it really does take some effort and there's something about the way you treat your plants and the way you touch your plants and the way you talk to your plants and all these things that go along with beyond the science, where you have to actually nurture your plants in some way. And maybe that's what I'm missing, I'm not sure. So I made a change, and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to garden the way that I would traditionally garden. Instead, I'm going to switch up, and I'm going to try hydroponics. I'm actually going to try gardening without soil and actually just running solution past the roots of my plants and see if I can grow something. And this is all about science. Sure, there's some sort of nurturing that has to go on, but essentially it's about science. It's about understanding how to use the science there. So I'm going to build my own homegrown hydroponic solution and see how it goes. So I'm going to share with you what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see if I can actually develop something that will grow and have some success in my yard and actually have something that starts to grow and bear fruit. So let's give it a shot. My wife says she's on board as long as I grow her tomatoes. So that's the one thing that I need to grow. And I'm going to try growing a few more herbs and maybe another vegetable or two, but let's see how that works out. It's going to be an ongoing process. I need to get started with it. I need to buy some parts and get some stuff together, but I'm going to share with you how I do it. Naturally, the first step is to go on the internet and start looking up hydroponic systems. Now, I'd seen several, but I gravitated to this one, the ebb and flow system, because it's very simple and straightforward. What you have is a system with a reservoir at the bottom, basically a bin of water with nutrients in it, that you pump up to the top where you have your plants that go against that water. And then that water drains back down, back into the nutrient system. So it's going in a circle. So I went ahead and started searching around my garage to see what I had, and it turned out that I did have the 2 bins I needed. I had a bin that I could use as a reservoir, and then I had something else I could use to let the water go through so I could use it to recapture it and put the plants in there. And then I went online and I ordered a couple of more things I needed, the return valve, the pump, a bubbler, some tubing, and so forth. And then I set about creating a rig, a stand basically, where I could put all this and have it sit together and be neat and organized. What I was concerned with was if I had things different ways, it might get a little messy. Plus I could put the plant level at, about my height so I could easily get in and check it out and take plants in and out and kind of check on its status without having to kind of bend over and do that. I just want to make it simple. So I used PVC for this, and what I wanted to do was create sort of a stand and just have it be there so I could actually work with it and make it pretty straightforward. I already had a lot of the PVC pipes on hand. I had to buy a couple of little components, but it made it really easy. So basically I put my reservoir at the bottom. I put this other part at the top to hold my plants. The tricky part was making sure that it was level. I had a little problem with the leveling on it. I'm not sure what happened exactly, but eventually I did get it level, and this is what it looks like. So I have a place that I can hold my plants up if I need to, if they need to go upright, or I could put grow lights. Next up, I needed to put holes in to make the plumbing work. So I have a 1-inch diameter hole cutter that I use. And I tried cutting this particular piece of plastic, the one I had at the top, and it wound up cracking, so I didn't use that. I wound up finding another piece of tub that I had, and I wound up drilling holes in it. And as you can see, it's actually just that easy. It just drills a hole in it, takes that 1 inch out. I could put the pump valve and the drain valve right next to each other, and I'm all set. So now it was time to start playing around with it. I found a spot out in my patio. It's a screen patio where it's mostly in the shade, but still pretty warm and nice and sunny out there, and it should work pretty well. Then I went ahead and started filling my tub and put my pump in it just to see how everything would come together. So here's the pump, I've got it in there, and this is where the great comedy moment happens. I hadn't glued together my PVC pipes. I hadn't put everything together the way I wanted it to, and as I started to fill it with water, things got a little bit out of control because of the way the plumbing worked and the way it pulled everything, and I wound up making an enormous mess on my patio, and on myself, of course, but it all worked out. This was a learning experience as I saw it. As I started to play around, I started to say, oh, what could I do to make this different? And eventually, I got it to work fairly well. As you can see, it's starting to work. You can see the water coming out the top, and that's pretty good. Now, the problem here is that the inlet is much larger than the outlet, so therefore the amount of water that's coming into it is way too much, and so I have to kind of adjust this a little bit. And I was wondering if maybe there was a little adjustment on it manually somewhere, but there's not. So I wound up filling the tub all the way to the top, which is a huge problem. It was just too much water coming in. So I had to make some adjustments to my design, and this is where the fun starts when you start to think about it. What could I do to make it different so this wouldn't happen anymore? As you can see, the water outlet, it's got a good steady stream. So there's no problem with the amount of water that's coming through. It's just the volume of water that's coming in is so much greater because of the size of the tubes that I use. And this was the way the thing was designed. So I was kind of like stuck between what I wanted to do and how I was going to make this work. And that's when I decided that I needed to change slightly. I think I may have come up with a viable working solution. You can see it's sort of staying at this level right now. What I did is I changed the plumbing on the pump a little bit here. So I added another piece of plumbing with the smaller inlet valve down there on the pump itself. And then just use this piece of pipe that comes up and attaches, kind of fits inside this 1-inch pipe. So I guess it's 3/4 inch. And then that sprays back up. And if I'm just letting the water fall back in there, it should be okay. And then the water level stays pretty much the same. I think this might work. All right, I got my bubblers in here. Everything seems to be good there. I think that's gonna work out. What I wound up doing with my tubing was actually to change something a little bit here. Let me take it out so I can show you. And cut some holes in my tubing so that the pressure goes down differently. So the pressure is different as it comes out of the pump, and it actually provides less water flow through the top part. So that was my solution to this problem. Now I probably could have cut the other tube as well, and maybe I'll wind up doing that later, but this is a good starting point. And with that, I think I'm gonna end this video. So now I have my hydroponics system set up. Next up, I'm gonna play around with actually adding the nutrients and then trying a couple of plants to see what happens, kind of giving it that perspective to see what goes on. But for now, this looks like it's in good shape, and I think I've got something that's gonna work here. Let's see how it goes now.
What's your point, David?